Hello, welcome to the People Profit Podcast, the show where we flip the script on traditional business thinking and prove that when you put people first, profits follow. I'm Sandra Coker, your guide on this journey to more engaged teams, loyal customers, and a healthier bottom line. These episodes are brought to you by Human Power Solutions, helping organizations unlock the human potential that powers performance. Whether you're a leader, an HR pro, or a curious change maker, buckle up. We're diving into fresh stories, real-world strategies, and a few laughs along the way. Ready to turn your workplace into a profit-powered people machine? Let's get started. Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the People Profit Podcast, where we dive into the stories and strategies that connect purpose to performance. Today's guest is someone who truly embodies what it means to lead with voice, vision, and vulnerability. Helen Jonsen is an award-winning journalist, speaker, and the founder of Helen Jonsen Media. She has had a fascinating career in TV journalism, digital innovation, public service, and nonprofit advocacy. And today, she's here to talk about what she calls a kaleidoscope career, which is super fascinating. I'm so excited. Helen's story is one of reinvention, resilience, and a remarkable communication. And I cannot wait for you to hear the wisdom she brings to this conversation. Helen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to our conversation and meeting virtually your audience.
Yeah, I'm so excited. So you and I have never met before. So I'm really excited to get to know you a little bit, reading your background and learning about the Kaleidoscope career. I absolutely resonated with it. So I'm looking forward to this. So I want to jump in to this beautiful phrase, this kaleidoscope career. Can you share what it means to you and how it reflects in your own journey?
Absolutely. So I probably didn't invent the phrase. In fact, it was used in another way. But when I first added it to my biography some 15 or more years ago, people liked it when I said I have a kaleidoscope career in basically media.
Yeah.
And about a year and a half ago, when I launched again my next iteration in life with Helen Jonsen Media, I was interviewed like this, and I mentioned Kaleidoscope Career, and everyone seemed to jump on it and gravitate toward it. So what it means to me is if you can picture a kaleidoscope, you twist and turn the barrel, and these primary colors that never change just keep dropping into different images and forms to create just beautiful pictures in front of you. And I think that's true of our careers. I don't think of reinvention or pivoting. I see it more that we have a basic set of primary colors, if you will, of skills and talents compounded by our experience and our passion that follows us through everything we do. To me, that's the kaleidoscope career. You might have a new iteration. As you said, I've been in journalism a long time and media and public service, and I've worked for myself and I've worked for big companies. Every time something new dropped and created a new and brilliant image.
I love that. So we talk about your path and it having it shift so much, right, through the different industries and these life stages that we all go through. How has this idea help you stay grounded in the path as you've made those shifts?
I think it's a great question because I have worked and chatted with other women to talk about the same thing so that we don't go into a conversation saying, I used to do this, and I used to do this, and I used to do this, and now I do this. Instead, we look at this kaleidoscope career in the full picture and say, I have certain skills and passions. My skills are always in communications. I'm a writer, a speaker. I've been in broadcast journalism. I've been behind the scenes as a producer. I bring those skills with me everywhere, but I also bring a passion for doing good and working with mission-driven companies and organizations as much as possible because I'm a roll-up-your-sleeves volunteer. So if you take all of those pieces, they go with me right along. And it's the same if you're having a conversation, maybe a new job seeker. They need to be able to find their own through line and describe it to others to show that we're not a mix of things. We are a basis, a foundation for what we do and how we do it. And, the difference in this kaleidoscope career is that Sometimes there are gaps along the way, as women know. There are disruptions. There are reasons to step back, to downshift. And that's all part of a kaleidoscope career. And we should own that proudly.
I agree with that. My career started off in hospitality, went to staffing, had kids, all that, and network marketing, done a little bit of everything. And people are always like, how did you land here? And I'm like, everything I've done along the way has brought me to this space where I can excel and succeed. So I think a lot of women feel that. I think, well, people in general feel that way. But I love what you just said about the through line rather than the perfect linear resume.
Right.
Can you just expand a little bit on that for our listeners? And a lot of our listeners are these young up and coming leaders who are just starting in their careers. And I'd love you to kind of bring that knowledge to them.
Well, even what you just said, you just described your through line, right? You said there are different parts, but as I meet you, as I get to know you, part of your through line is a communicator, a people person, someone who can look at something and analyze it and see what shift needs to be made. That's part of your through line.
Mhm.
That's what people need to concentrate on, is look at what they've done, how they've done it, and how it's continued to be the underpinning of what they do. And I think for people starting out in careers, maybe they've worked a couple jobs already, or maybe they've just had one. It's always keeping that top of mind. What are those skills that they have that are so fundamental that they can share with others to go into whatever that next iteration is? It may not be the same industry.
Yeah.
It may be something totally different. You may find a passion that takes you into nonprofit work, but you may not stay there. That may change again in your career. So your career really is the sum of its parts. It's one big balloon of things as opposed to little tiny pieces. It's the little tiny pieces that drag people down because they think, oh, I did this. Well, maybe I did that. Oh, I should have said that. Think about that through line. That's really where it's taking you to success.
So I'm going to ask a question, an HR related question. People that are interviewing, right? There's so much focus is on why did you leave this job and why did you
Yeah.
leave that job, right? So when you're faced with that very standard, typical
Mhm.
interview question, what's the best way to answer that?
That's where I think you have to be prepared. Well, any conversation, you need to be prepared.
Yeah.
But I think you need to be prepared in a way that takes you through that through line. Stop and think about it. Some people will say, use a skills-based resume in that you have, what are the main parts that have created your success in the past? And
Yeah.
why did you take a break? You can say why you took a break. I think it's easier to do that now than it ever was before.
Yeah.
Certainly it used to be considered the kiss of death, especially for women, a generation ago, but that's changing. And I think if you can fulfill that question by saying, I took a break, I needed to be full-time with my children or part-time with my children, or during my break, I found my passion in what I'm talking to you about now. And I want to explore that further. But I do think you have to think it through and prepare for that.
I love that. I love that. So I want to do a little bit of a shift here because I really loved, in doing my research and just kind of listening to all of your media that's out there, which there's a lot, everyone. The storytelling segment. I love the storytelling piece because I think people really resonate with that. So, you've worked in media, communications at the highest levels. I mean, you've been there, done that, right? And you've helped leaders shape how they show up. What role do you think in today's workplace does storytelling play in leadership?
Well, it's interesting because McKinsey just did a report that said CEOs have to be the best storytellers. They need to be able to tell their own personal story with authenticity. They also need to be able to explain the why of what they do and the why of their organization. That's where storytelling comes in. I like to liken facts and stats to a hot dog. So you can have a basic fact, and that's like the regular hot dog just sitting there. But when you wrap that in a brioche bun, that's your story. That changes that whole simple sausage into something worth eating, right?
Yeah.
That's your story. So anyone really, have great stories. We all have little anecdotes that we tell once in a while. But what we need to do is hone those to fit the moment. The story needs to fit the moment. I worked with a woman who was transitioning, who was job seeking. She had been in media, in public relations and marketing for many years, then went on her own. And then during the pandemic, sort of stayed out on her own, but more part-time, and was now looking at getting back into a large company for an internal creative team.
Yeah.
And she was struggling with, what is my story? How do I twist that and turn it and tweak it so that it still makes me the leader that I am? And what do I share in that moment? And that was very powerful for her to have that mind shift, to start thinking about that. And we worked through, so what are the things you're proud of? What are you most proud of? Why? And then let's narrow them down to something easy to remember, easy to roll off the tip of your tongue when you need it. And that's true of any leader at any time. I call this your signature remarks.
Yeah.
Things that you have already prepped and that you can pull out of your pocket anytime you need them.
So you brought me to my next question, because that was very fascinating to me, the signature remarks toolkit, right? So what is it and how can it help people lead? You just talked about the interviewing piece, but how can it help people lead and influence more effectively?
Right. Well, here's where the story comes from, where creating the toolkit comes from. As a journalist, we would often get sent to interview actors and directors when they were on what we call a press junket about their new movie or their new project, right? And you'd go into a room and they were sitting in that room all day answering the same questions over and over again. The best ones answered them as if they'd never said those words before, right? That was the most exciting thing. But it took practice and preparation. Now, generally, they had a team doing that for them, right? Media coaches making that work. But why don't the rest of us do that? Why don't the rest of us have those stories, those little facts and stats like the hot dog dressed in a story, our backstory, what our company means to us? Why don't we have a handful of those in our toolkit, just like the people at a junket, so that if we are talking in a networking meeting, or if we've gone into a sales meeting, we get asked a couple of questions, or just meeting like this, why don't we have those stories to be able to share when we need them? And I start the remarks by saying, everyone needs to be able to introduce themselves properly. Right. It's amazing how many people can't do that.
Yeah.
I like to say, if we had introduced me on a stage, I would have said, thank you for that introduction. I am Helen Jonsen, and I'm the chief storyteller of Helen Jonsen Media. And I would go on from there. I might say, my passion is to help you speak better and succeed with confidence, right? Those are things I prep in my head. I never say them exactly the same way, but I'm comfortable saying them, right? And that's what every leader needs. But I don't want to just say leader. That's what every person needs, because everyone speaks for a living, right? I was in a room full of Harvard alumni, and I said, how many in this room speak for a living? And 2 people put their hands up. And I looked at them. I said, weren't you in a sales meeting this week? Didn't you give a presentation to a board? Aren't you a lawyer who's always talking? And they nodded. And I said, so how many of you speak for a living? And everyone in the room.
Yeah. I love that.
Right. Because we all speak for a living. So if we have those things that we're prepared with, it's so much easier, right?
Yeah.
So much easier to pull the moment, the story that fits the moment, if we already have them in the back of our minds.
So some people might think that, they're prepping for a performance. So how do you coach people to command a room without feeling like they're rehearsed or they're performing?
Right. I don't want them memorizing. I want people to think through their bullet points, but with their personal piece of it. So even if you were, say, the president of or the head of a city agency, and there's certain things you have to get out, you have to say, but there's a way for you to say them. So you as the leader want to say, oh, we've run, 55 million subway rides this year, or, we're subway riders. Okay. But you could start that by saying, I was on the subway this morning and it reminded me that we do 55 million of these rides a year. That's how you bring that story into play. And that's how you command the room and hook your audience and engage them in the conversation.
because running a bunch of stats, just like people's eyes glaze over,
No.
mine do anyway. So.
That's right. In television, we always called it the people story,
Yeah.
right? I mean, every month after month, you do, the unemployment statistics or whatever. And nobody listens to those after a while. But when you explain that, this guy has been out of work for 6 months and his family is struggling to put food on the table, now that statistic has a story that goes
right.
along. We call it the people story.
Running a business is hard. Developing your people shouldn't be. At Human Power Solutions, we act as your outsourced chief learning officer, designing custom learning and development experiences that actually move the needle. No fluff, no cookie cutter workshops, just results. Whether your people need better communication, stronger leadership, or less burnout, we provide strategic solutions that align with your goals and keep your team moving forward. Visit hpowersolutions.com and unlock your team's full potential without disrupting operations.
So we think about the women, our young women out there that are stepping into their leadership, roles here. How can small communication shifts help men and women actually, lead with more authority?
I will start with women because there are very different pieces that affect women. And I'm glad you said the next generation or so. I have 3 daughters in their 20s and 30s now who are certainly maneuvering through their careers. One has taken a couple of kaleidoscope steps. The others are focused in one arena and, continuing on that track. But they still have to do interviews. They still have to meet people. They still have to give presentations no matter what they're doing. So I think it's really important, again, for women to own their power, to step into their power with their confidence. There are some things we do because we've heard it all our lives and we think we should. So instead of starting with a question where I might say, "Oh, Sandra, I'm sorry, I didn't understand that." We don't have to be sorry.
Right.
We have a right to ask that question. I have a right to say, "Sandra, tell me more." Or, "That was interesting, but it's not quite clear."
Right.
I'm not being apologetic. I'm owning that moment and asking the question. Also, when we walk into a room, it's very easy to, especially if it's a room full of men or people we don't know, it's very easy for a young woman to be taken as an assistant.
Yes.
Right? Doesn't matter how old she is. It's just a thing. And there are stories of CEOs and even a military leader out of uniform who walked in a room full of men and got asked to get the coffee. Because it was a woman who was perceived as an assistant. The way we get past that is we own our introduction. We start the introductions. We walk into a room and say, "Hi, I'm so-and-so. This is why I'm here." May not be a title, but you may be saying, "I'm here to support Joe," or "I'm here because I'm the lead on this project." When you open that up first, you're telling the world, "I'm not the assistant. I'm here to be taken seriously by all of you." Right? And here's my name and don't forget it. And always introduce yourself with your whole name. And that goes for men and women because that's what's memorable.
Right.
I mean, think about going to a conference and seeing a speaker and afterwards going, "That guy was so great. Oh, and oh, John was such a good speaker." John who? It's like going to the movies and saying, "I saw this great movie and Kate is such a fabulous actress."
Right.
Oh, who? Kate Winslet? Kate Hepburn? Kate who?
It's funny. I've got young ones too, which is really what kind of like prompts my whole passion for this. I've got a 30, 27, and 25. And like my 30-year-old is doing his Kaleidoscope Career, and the other 2 are very moving up doing the latter thing, and they're different than their respective companies. And the conversations we have are just so interesting. And I find it to be just fascinating. What I'm curious to see what this next generation of leaders is going to look like. And I love how practical you just made that. Like the points that you gave to people, like get "I'm sorry" out of your vocabulary and
Yes.
own who you are, right? Those are two really great tips for anybody, right? But I think, especially for women that are navigating those leadership, in rooms where they're underestimated, right? You're the assistant or you're the whatever that is, right? But let's dig into another powerful tool that you talk about. And we're doing a ton of posts on this, not on purpose, but on emotional intelligence, right? EQ. And you said that leaders need to really read the room, not just walk in with that script kind of thing. Can you share with our audience and also with me, because I'm learning so much, how emotional intelligence has shaped the way you lead and communicate?
I think there's probably been failures along the way. Times when you didn't read the room, times when you didn't realize that there was something culturally not that you weren't connecting on. I think it's really important. I was in a leadership program, and the leader of the program does a lot of work in Japan. And he didn't call it reading the room. He said the Japanese translated to reading the air. What is going on in the space?
Yeah.
What is happening? Who's feeling sidelined? Who's feeling that they're not being recognized? That's important for leadership, particularly. That's an important thing to realize. What is going on in the room? Who are you talking to? Are you speaking to new hires, or are you speaking to other CEOs? And how do you do that? When you're speaking to new hires, you shouldn't be talking down to them. You should still be talking to them as professional people at work, right? Putting them on the same level, not demeaning them. And that's the same with male to women, because again, women have had particular issues in the workplace in that. They need to be respectful of who's in the room. Also, even when you're preparing what you say, think first. A joke or a comment that might land in a room full of men may not land in a room full of women.
Right.
Also, what the baby boomers might land among themselves isn't going to land with Gen Z or early alpha coming into the place. You almost just have to stay abreast of what's going on around you so that you don't make those faux pas.
Do you have any stories that, where you kind of went into a room with one aspect and you're like, this isn't going to work, and just change your approach? Do you have any particular stories?
I can't think of anything offhand.
Okay.
But I was reading a post on LinkedIn this week, and it was from a woman leader now who originally the post was all about how she'd worked right through her pregnancy, and it's got a lot of attention around that. So this other woman commented saying, I had a friend who was at a cocktail party with her husband, who was the businessman. And his boss says to her, why don't you just have a C-section so we don't all have to wonder about when this is going to happen? I mean, basically, this is what he says. I'm paraphrasing her paraphrase, but that was basically it. Well, okay, maybe we're the only two people that heard that, but could you imagine saying that out loud in a space? It's totally inappropriate every which way that you can ever think of on just so many levels.
Yeah.
I did a course recently, and I used an example that's a little dated maybe, but it still kind of gives you that idea of read the room, know what's culturally appropriate. There's a folk singer by the name of Tom Paxton. He's an older man now. You may not remember him, but he was responsible for songs like Marvelous Toy and Ramblin' Boy and just this whole catalog of wonderful music. And he wrote a song about his young daughter at the time. This goes back to when he was a younger man. And was talking about how she's just a whirlwind in a room. And all of a sudden, when you don't hear her, you feel like you're sitting on a bomb. Well, any parent can giggle at that, that idea of something's going to explode.
Yes, yeah.
But he told that story in Northern Ireland in the 70s during the Troubles when bombs were exploding. And he said the word bomb and nobody laughed. Everyone went silent.
Yeah, yeah.
And I know that's a big example, but it does happen all the time.
Yeah.
Because someone says something that is just culturally inappropriate or inappropriate around the time of whatever's breaking in the news.
Yeah.
And you have to kind of keep up with that. That's part of that emotional intelligence, right?
I think that's important too, because, these days we have a lot of people that are walking around with just that little mirage, right? Everything is so good in my life. You have no idea what people are dealing with or going through. So being really careful about what you're saying, because you don't know where people are coming from. I mean, I know I've stepped in it a few times. Bostonian, Irish girl. I'm kind of like, in people's faces, not really, but I kind of just say what's on my mind. And like I've had to really be careful, because I think it's a dog world out there. So we need to,
And there was a generational thing. Thing. And
definitely.
I think that's harder to keep up with,
I
because
know.
if you're not in it.
Yeah.
So it may be incumbent upon larger companies, larger leadership teams to just have those kinds of informal conversations once in a while to get a feeling for what is on people's minds and how they're saying things. Because really easy to do it wrong.
I don't know about you, but like sometimes my kids would be like, "Mom, you can't say that."
Yeah. Yes. It gets targeted at me, but it gets targeted at their father even more.
Yeah. So I love this. So thinking about like how you help others. So you help people in a lot of different ways, but how do you help others lead from a place of awareness and humility?
Oh, that's an interesting question. Awareness and humility just comes down to what we were just talking about. Being willing to keep your antenna up and your ears open and your eyes open, being curious. Curiosity to me is the basis for everything, for every career, particularly a Kaleidoscope career, but also just for all of us, because curiosity is the basis for forever learning, right?
Yep.
So just because you're the head of a division and you know how to run that division doesn't mean you're good at everything else. You need that curiosity to understand better what other jobs people are doing. What are they thinking about? What's appropriate to talk about? You need to be open to absorbing all of that, being the sponge, so that you can lead with that humility. There's nothing more powerful than saying to someone, "Tell me more."
Yeah. I love that. And like we had a meeting this week and I told my team, I'm like, it's something about that I'm not very good at this. And I'm really relying on you guys to be good at this. Right. So they know. I think that's really interesting because I think so many times leaders, especially for the Gen Xer, I think you are too, right? So it's like we're so used to that autocratic do this, and not allowing, I wasn't really allowed to think about different ideas and be creative. And I think it's a huge difference now in our world.
Yeah. I come up through a different layering, if you will, up through media where newsrooms you learned from the best, but there had to be collaboration just because there were too many moving parts.
Yeah.
And I think that allowed us then to learn together. But there were plenty of times when you were the producer and the whole shebang relied on you, so that you didn't go to blank air at 8:00 at night. There were times when you took control and you were more demanding.
Yeah.
That was always harder for women, especially young women, because we got saddled with B word all the time. But I've learned that it can't always work that way, and that it shouldn't work that way. The collaboration is what's more important.
Love that. So I want to wrap up this topic with something I know that you care very deeply about. It's about helping women claim their power. And so what are some of the toughest expectations or barriers you face when you were trying to lead with your own voice, whether it was in media or your company now, or?
Well, I think there's been a generational shift, right? It was much harder when women were coming up through the 80s and earlier, because it was expected that you either weren't as good as the guy would get the next job or the next step up faster than the women in the room. And that was really obvious and evident. So because of that, we did have to learn to speak for ourselves a little more loudly and a little more clearly to make that next move. I think now it's sort of the same in that you need to always answer for yourself and make sure that your voice is being heard. We talked a little about the things like not apologizing.
Right.
That's important. But there's a little more to it than that, in that it's worth putting yourself forward, putting your thoughts forward, even if you started to say something and somebody cuts you off, you have a chance to say, excuse me, I'd like to make that more interesting. Or I have more information on that I'd like to suggest, which is a way of saying, that's nice, but I own this.
Right. Yeah,
Without
yeah.
being rude, without shutting them down. Don't shut yourself down, right? So the guy talks over you, or even another woman, talks over you, to say, basically take control of whatever this idea is. That gives you the chance not to just sit back and stew, but to say, I'd like to add to that. Or, as I was saying earlier, what? There's more to this.
Yeah.
You need to always take control of the moment. And it's not so easy, because sometimes it's easier, it feels better to stew for a little while.
Yeah. Have you learned anything the hard way as you sit in your truth?
Yeah, no, I think you learn everything the hard way, right? Plenty of times when you get put in your place. Every job has not gone the way I wanted it to. There have been, because of media the way it is and media disruption, there were layoffs. There were times when I stepped into what was the bright, shiny object, thinking I could help change a situation, only to find out that wasn't possible and we were going to part ways, and maybe the timing was my own and maybe it wasn't. So you learn from every single one of those things, right? You learn why you were pushed out the door. You learn why somebody else, got moved in ahead of you. Sometimes it's because their uncle is the boss. Sometimes it's because it really wasn't the right fit. You weren't the right fit at the right time in that situation. But I think once you can talk yourself through those things, you start to come out better on the other side. I think the worst thing it's bad for men, but I do think it's worse for women, is when you're in a toxic environment.
Yeah.
An environment that just for whatever reason is overwhelming or denigrating or belittling. And as much as we've talked about some things to try to help you through those, sometimes it's just beyond that. And sometimes it just leads to burnout. And that's where, we need to make decisions for ourselves and figure out what our next move is. Sometimes you need outside help. Sometimes you just need time.
And that's the beauty of, as we started with the Kaleidoscope Career. So if you can look at these transitions, and even if they're unexpected transitions, sometimes they bring you to just a beautiful place.
That's right.
Right?
And you learn from everything. As long as you have that curiosity, you're always going to learn from everything you do.
Love it. Love it. You have done so much to amplify other people's voices. What's one message that you hope listeners walk away with today?
Curiosity. Make curiosity your superpower. Read everything. Think about everything. Always say, tell me more. Learn that next thing. I think you just absorbing everything around you just makes you so much stronger and so much more aware, and makes you a better reader.
Mm-hmm. And you do speaking engagements and things like that. Talk about, for anyone that wants to connect with you or follow your work, where should they go?
Oh, thank you for that. So I have the eponymous company and website at helenjonsen.com with my Scandinavian-ish spelling of Johnson, Jonsen. And you can find this Kaleidoscope Career as a podcast wherever you stream media. It's also on Substack and LinkedIn newsletters. My interest is in bringing better speaking and communications to individual leaders as well as the C-suite, but also to the entire stakeholder base, making people ambassadors for their own cause, understanding their own why, and be able to present their signature remarks wherever they are.
I love it. I love it. I've subscribed to your podcast. I'm so excited to listen to it. I love that whole journey because it just resonates.
There are some
with
really
me.
remarkable people telling their story.
Yeah. Well, Helen, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story, your insight, and your voice with us today. Your Kaleidoscope Career is such an inspiring reminder that success doesn't have to just look one way. It can be bold, vibrant, and ever evolving. To our listeners, don't forget to subscribe, share this episode with a friend, and check out this Kaleidoscope Career wherever you stream your podcasts. Until next time, keep leading with purpose and keep making people your profit.
That's a wrap on this episode of the People Profit Podcast. If you found a nugget of wisdom or even just a spark of inspiration, share the love, subscribe, leave us a review, and pass the episode along to a colleague who's ready to build a people-first culture. Big thanks to our sponsor, Human Power Solutions, for championing workplace where humans thrive and profits rise. Want to learn how they can energize your team? Head over to hpowersolutions.com to get started. I'm Sandra Coker, reminding you that when you invest in people, you invest in profit. See you next time.